Good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast live interview. This is a weekly live stream that we do that becomes part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast. And if you don't listen to or watch the Transformation Ground Control podcast, you can do so by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So be sure to check it out. And our topic for today is keys to business process optimization during digital transformation. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment, who I'm really excited to have on the show. It's a first-time guest, but he's someone I've known for a while, and he's someone in the industry doing this sort of stuff every day. So we thought it'd be a great topic of discussion for him, and to have him be on the show to sort of share his battle wounds and scars, having been through a bunch of process optimization work at his organization, who I'll let him introduce here in just a moment. Again, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting and host this weekly podcast. We cover this topic every week, or digital transformation topics related every week. We're going to have questions that I have to start with here in a moment, but I encourage the audience to ask questions. We really like to let the audience sort of hijack the conversation and take over and ask the questions you want to ask, and we'll get to those questions as well. So be sure to drop those in the chat wherever you're watching. We're going to watch the stream here, the chat stream. So anywhere whatever platform you're on, listening or watching, just drop it in the chat. We'll see it. And we'll get to your questions here today as well. And speaking of the chat, if you don't mind just dropping in the chat what city and country you're joining from today, that'll help us just get a better understanding where this global audience is joining from here today. We tend to get people from all over the world, so it's always fun to see where everyone's joining from today. So if you don't mind just dropping in the chat, what city and country are you joining from here today? So again, our topic is keys to business process optimization during digital transformation. We want to cover everything related to how to improve your business processes, how to assess your current state, how to improve the processes, how to optimize the processes, all that stuff as part of your digital transformation. And joining us to unpack that conversation, help us understand that topic a little bit more in detail, is Tavis Addison from Volkswagen Financial Services. So Tavis, thank you for being here.
You got it. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here. It's exciting, and it's fun to talk to you in this sort of format here today. We've known each other for a while, but we never had this sort of a live discussion before. So this will be a fun topic. Before we get into some of the questions, maybe just tell us a little bit about your background, and then I'll ask you to shift gears and talk about what you do at Volkswagen Credit.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, my background is plain and simple. A lot of the same thing over and over again for a little bit over 25 plus years. Started my career managing several contact centers. Very early in my career, and then shortly after that with APAC, which is an outsourcer. I joined Allstate and then Allstate Financial. So I spent a lot of time in Allstate, almost a decade, focusing on converting manual to automated solutions, everything from making sure that we're prepared for SEC audits to how can we do a better job of moving mutual funds, making those experiences more modern. And then after that, I spent another 10 years with Discover Network. So in Discover Network, I helped establish the Lean Center of Excellence there. Again, doing a lot of the same things. That's where I introduced IBM BlueWorks Live to the organization, moving us from from static mapping. And then now I am with Volkswagen Financial Services. It's been a great ride for going on 6 years this year. I am the head of business process optimization for North America, for the North America region now, as of another year ago. And I have responsibility for optimizing processes for the US, Canada, as well as strategic alignment for Mexico.
Okay, great. So in your role, I guess, just to maybe understand your background a little bit in your role at Volkswagen Financial Services, tell us a little bit about the organization itself, this process optimization organization. Is it part of a broader technology group or an operations group, or how does this process group fit within the overall structure of the company?
Well, we actually sit within what we call customer engagement, and customer engagement is where the bread and butter is, right? All the contracts where the loans are originated, our customers are served, and it's highly operational. My team is a small team of 11, and we focus less on the number of us, but more so on the skill set. So my team actually supports not only operations, but we also support back office. So we support the front office and the back office. We have a technology stack that we leverage specifically around workflow automation solutions. But I always give significant credit to my process specialists. That is, to me, where the 80/20 sits. Their role and purpose is to discover process, most of the time unstructured, bring that to a high process visibility. Regardless of our customers are typically internal, but at the end of the day, our goal is to establish models across the organization that people can follow. Number two, we also teach lean. So we're also the internal sort of academic pod. And then outside of that, our whole focus is on acceleration, accelerating us from where we are today and where we need to be tomorrow in terms of how do we actually keep costs down in terms of being able to operate and optimizing how we do that.
Yeah, no, it sounds interesting. And I'm sure at a larger organization that's more established, I would imagine there's mature processes that are ripe for improvement and looking at ways to
Absolutely.
change the way things have always been.
Yes.
And
Always.
we'll get to some of that change management piece of it too, especially as you deal with tenured employees and tenured mature processes. And we'll want to make sure to uncover that here in a minute. But maybe just to start to set the context then of this whole topic of process optimization, why do you think process optimization and what you do is so important, especially if an organization is undertaking some sort of technology initiative?
I think optimization is so important because you can spend a lot of time putting technology on a broken process. And that is the biggest waste. My team in the organization, we have a high priority on process visibility. And it's something that I'll continuously talk about. And if anybody knows me, that is always the start. Being able to see the as is and then determine where you want to go first. And it's not as simple as understanding the steps, but it's more about understanding the connected systems, understanding what is the expected outcome of where you're trying to go. But I think at the end of the day, why is it so important is because you just do not want to place a lot of cost and time on processes that are not ready for it. And that's where you lose trust. And then the next time you have a great idea, you're crying wolf. It's very hard to move on to the next big thing if you weren't successful the first time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you don't want to lose that momentum and that just overall direction you start on by derailing it with sort of broken processes that can't support the new technology.
Absolutely.
So I think you sort of answered it, but I'll ask it more explicitly. But I think you sort of touched on this here in your previous response. But when you're going through a technology initiative, which do you think should come first then? The business process optimization or the technology? In other words, a lot of software vendors will say, hey, don't worry about this current state. Don't worry about your processes. Our technology will drive the process improvements for you. So let's start with the technology that'll drive the process improvements. And then there's the other school of thought that says, let's start with processes first, figure out how we want them to look, how we want to improve them, then figure out how technology fits on top. So where do you stand in that whole debate or that whole continuum of the argument?
Yeah, well, I'll say the very popular, it depends. And I don't think there's a one way. We operate under a certain term called pull forwards, as well as the agile approach. So you've got three approaches, right? I think the old approach is waterfall. Let's improve the process and to the T. But by that time, technology is moving so fast. Your technology solution could be quickly outdated. So what we focus on first is how can I deliver a little bit of value faster? So the process doesn't have to be optimized or improved. It may still have some defects. Your process may not be as fast as you want it to, but maybe you have 10 steps that are unnecessary. Maybe you don't need a 2 eyes approach on everything anymore if you can apply a small set of automation there while you go. So I think it really comes down to it depends. And I think if you focus on process visibility, you understand your process costs, and you live by a model that gives you a baseline that you can follow in terms of, if I automate these 3 steps, this is the return I'm going to get. And then I'll focus on the rest later. So I think it depends.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think a lot of times too, what I've seen is a lot of times if you've got a really broken process or a process that you really want to overhaul as part of a growth strategy or an improvement strategy, you want to take the time to do that rather than just rushing out to find the technology first. But if it's a process that's more of an incremental improvement, or it's a more of a vanilla process that maybe you could just sort of defer to how the technology handles it out of the box, or any sort of technology might handle a given solution, it seems as though in those cases, maybe that's where you could lead with technology more than you lead with process. But I think you're right. It depends on the process, I imagine, and how important that business process is to your overall growth and improvement strategy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you always have to take risk in perspective. Uh, we follow a scoring model that we established here at VWFS years ago. It gives us an ability to follow a predictive model that says, pretty much in layman terms, if I do this, then therefore I'm in the realm of avoiding a certain amount of cost, and that gives us a gauge, and that's how we rank what we're going to do first, second, third, all the way to 99. And there may be a confidence level that comes out of it. We're 60% confidence when we don't know anything, and then we raise that confidence from there as we analyze more. But at the end of the day, I think what you're referring to, Eric, is when you're touching core systems, then throwing technology at a core system that poses great risk if you're wrong. I would strongly recommend at that point that you must optimize first. And I always go by the term, I'll never forget, I can't remember who the presenter was, but he was the lead of Lean many, many years ago with Kraft before they broke off. And he came up with the term good enough. And I still manage all my teams and work with all my peers the same way. Is once we get to a point of good enough, it's time to move forward and start going after the value.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges with process optimization?
You know what? I think I'm preaching to the choir on this one, right? Number one, change management. And I'm not talking about the change where you're communicating what the changes are. And right. I think a lot of times we get mixed up on which change management are we referring to. I'm a ProSci fan. I certified with ProSci many years ago, and I have many certifications. And I always say one of the best certifications, most useful experiences I've had was with ProSci. I think, and I know at the same time that it doesn't matter if 2 + 2 is 4. That does not mean that the business is going to sign off and buy in and move forward. And in today's world, we are applying new technologies with people who were working without any technology, right? The more tenured they are, the harder it is to get them to trust automation. And then the second one, I strongly believe, is that you need to start with the baseline. I think a lot of times it's the right thing to do. It makes sense. It's going to satisfy the customer. Well, what's the return on investment? And if you're going to spend money on technology, start first with what is it costing us today to do business the way that we're doing it? And the more times you can express in a fact-based approach the return on investment and follow that model that your controlling or finance department can get behind. They know how you got to the number. They know how you're going to deliver, and they can measure it afterward. The more times you can do that, I think it will embed trust, and your journey will be much more successful. That's what I've found. But change is tough, and making sure that you got a model in place where you can be a bit predictive in your ROI is key.
Right. Yeah. Great advice. I'd be curious to hear from the audience too, what you think the biggest challenge to process optimization is. So if you just drop in the chat, I'd be curious to see how you all respond. What do you think is the most difficult thing? Is it change management? Is there some other aspect to it that you think is the most difficult? And speaking of the audience too, I appreciate everyone dropping in the chat where they're joining from today. We've got people from all over the world, ranging from, for example, Illinois. Lauren from LinkedIn is from Illinois, which I think that's where you are too, Tavis, right?
Yes.
And we've got Ryan from Denver, Rob from San Diego, California, Kyler from Denver, Gustavo from Lisbon, Portugal, Wendy from Pennsylvania, Sam from London, James from Bristol, UK. Thank you all for being here today. We have Andrzej from Prague, Adam from Finland. So a lot of variety for where people are joining from today. So thank you for being here and for letting us know where you're at here today. Here's one comment that just came in response to my question of what is the hardest part of business process optimization or business process management. And Kyler on LinkedIn says biggest challenge to business process management is people. So she agrees with you on that, Tavis, which is interesting. Here's a question for you, Tavis, also from Kyler on LinkedIn. She asked, what are some of the most common process challenges in organizations you support? So, in the scope of the work you're doing at Volkswagen Financial Services, what are some of the common process challenges, or maybe a couple examples that you could share with us?
Yeah. In general, generically, I'll speak, which I think is very normal, right, is the manual. And when we have over 63 RPA automations that are running pretty much consistently. And while it's a lot to manage, but it's only a few people to manage that, right? And it's doing the work of many people. The benefit of that is that we can see what the bots are doing. We can see how they're performing. We can see when they stop working, right? The challenge is in the back office piece when you need people. And we in our organization, there's a lot of decisioning that takes place. So there's intelligence that we don't have the automation for, and where the processes or the procedures that live within the processes are very tough to see. And COVID blinded us, right? A lot of companies were not ready for COVID to say, now I can't observe you. I can't Gemba the process as easily as I could before. And not everyone has process mining. So the challenges, right, I think that we face the most, or that take up most of our time and material, are procedure steps that require a human decision, where it's difficult to observe how they make those decisions and how we model those decisions in a way where we can then automate those decisions. And that's really where the next journey is, right? That's really where AI is coming into the foreplay. But when we think transactional, and when we are trying to make predictive statements in regards to pricing and predictive statements in regards to what do we do next, I think those are some of the most difficult process challenges that you can have. And then one last one I think is really around the attended by. So when you're working with a group, a particular department, and their journey is to now work with automation, but those individuals have been with the company for a very long time and they're experts at what they do, they're great at what they do, but now you're introducing automation and you want them to trust the automation. It's very difficult. So it's a mindset to get them beyond. And I think that's where a lot of your energy is spent. The automation's fine. It's running and saying, hey, look, I've processed 20,000. What's next? But when it comes to the people side of it, it's a lot of repetitive conversations over the data. And if you can get them to start believing in the data, things start to roll downhill. Yeah. It just starts to go real fast. And then now they want more, they want more, they want more.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of along the same lines of what you were just saying. Here's a follow-up question from Ryan on LinkedIn. He says, with the emergence of tech like AI, machine learning, Internet of Things, blockchain, et cetera, how do you attempt to remain current without overshooting and relying too much on technology?
Wow, that's a good one.
It is good.
I will say that there are some times, and our platform we leverage is UiPath, and for UiPath, I mean, the support has been amazing in regards to literally the on the ground support for the platform. What I will say is that you could have the tendency to be the lead, or you can be the fast follower. And for us, it feels like we have been the lead on some of the new technologies. I'll just bring up machine learning, for example. We have a very robust machine learning automation that runs today that helps us to audit. And it's very accurate. You can see how accurate it is. You can teach it and it will learn over time. The challenge is that you don't always want to go for the shiny new thing. And I think that's where the question may be coming to as well, is that you don't want to rely too much on automation until you know more, right? Just like with any new drug that comes out, right? Some people will rush towards the drug and some people will wait. And I would encourage everyone to, implement, try it, measure it over time, and see what contributions it brings. But I think the path forward in terms of ML and AI is proven. And to me, my model is always this: I can see what the automation is doing. It's very difficult for me to see what people are doing. So I'm going to place my bets on automation 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Very interesting. Yeah, that's good stuff for sure. In a interesting of that intersection, because you mentioned AI earlier as well. How some of these technologies are creating so many good opportunities, but at the same time, you don't want to get so far ahead on the technology that your processes can't keep up with it too. Like
Right.
You mentioned before. Here's another thought I had, or another question is around. You talked about change management earlier, and how change management is a difficult component of process optimization. How have you seen? And you also talked a little bit about ProSci and sort of having a structured framework for the change management side of things. But how do you see the two fitting together, the two disciplines of change management and process optimization? How do they intersect, or how do you see them working in concert?
It truly, it's well, first of all, depending on how your organization is built, you need a consultant. I really believe that we talk about the workforce today, and you have people who are remote, and you have the term hybrid. That means that sometimes I'll go into the office, sometimes I'm remote. That's our new world today. I apply that same approach and classification to the type of employee you need in order to be successful. So you need a hybrid sort of skill set now, right? That your employee is now a hybrid employee. I can both influence without authority, because a lot of these resources, they don't own the process. It's up to us to garner the trust from the business, the process owner. It is up to us to make sure that we are data stewards and we understand how that data is important to that customer or that business partner. But at the same time, the other side of us, we need to be a bit technical now. And that's the employee that I'm looking for. And right now, I think one of the challenges is that the resources that we have, the people who are experts at the business, who understand your business, have to grow. They have to either adopt those skill sets, or you have to go find people who have those skill sets. And I think that's how they work together. It's magical to be able to send one of your resources in that can both influence without authority. At the same time, they can also talk technical.
Yeah. Makes total sense. Yeah, and that's a key thing there too. Is have you found in your career that process and change practitioners or experts are sort of siloed in their thinking in terms of how you treat one or the other, or have you seen it sort of come together pretty well, with your team or with others that you've worked with throughout your career?
Yeah, I would say boldly, it does not come together very well.
You're right.
You could be the one in the room and you have the right answer. You could be Albert Einstein's grandson, and mathematically you have absolutely the right answer. But someone sitting across from you, who may understand the business more or have been there longer, has a number of reasons on why not. Without a mathematical reason or without a database statement. And a lot of times the nature in us as people will say, You know what? We're going to delay that. We don't want to do that right now. And I think that is the difference in the younger generation, right? I don't know which Gen O or whatever you want to call them, right? Even my daughter, right? You know, when I'm looking at my this was like a couple years ago, and I'm typing in Google where where we're going to go and put it in navigation, and she says to me like, "Why are you typing? Like, what do you do? I thought you were the automation guy." So
Right.
she looks at it as it's slow for me to type in the restaurant that we're going to go to and then put it in navigation. From her perspective, she just wants to say it.
Yeah.
And those are the employees of the new. Those are the employees in the future. So that change resistance will go down over time because of the employees, because of the new workforce. I don't think resistance is ever going to go away. I just love the fact that the new way of thinking, the resistance is against the old way,
Yeah.
which is amazing, right? But how long will it take us to get there? It's going to be a while.
Yeah. That's interesting. I guess I never really thought of it until you said it in that context or in that perspective of how maybe the change management challenges shift from future states and process improvements. Because we always talk about change management. If you change your process, it's going to create resistance. How do you overcome that? But what you're saying is sort of flipping that on its head and saying, well, actually, over time, you're going to see more resistance to the way things are because you've got broken processes or
Absolutely.
you're still using that. Do you remember the green screen mainframe
Oh
interface where
my
you
goodness.
type in the little transaction code? You had to memorize the transaction code to go to that one screen because you didn't have a graphical user interface.
Yeah.
So imagine your daughter or any, young professional coming up in the workforce and that's the system you put in front of them. It's just,
Oh man.
it's gonna be like learning a foreign language for them. They're not gonna understand
Right.
intuitively
There'll be
how.
a I'll pass. I'll look at the next employer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll go work somewhere else if this is what I'm gonna have to deal with here.
Absolutely.
And I suppose for do you see that for organizations like your own at Volkswagen Financial Services, ones that have been around for a long time, you spent decades investing in processes and technologies that are now presumably outdated. Do you see that call it maturity of processes and the tenure of employees and just sort of the fact that these processes are all baked into the organization over time? Does that make change more difficult or how does that affect your process optimization efforts?
I think naturally, regardless of the type of company you work for, the sector, the bigger the ship, the longer it takes to turn it around, right? If I've got a small boat, then I'm going to turn around much faster than you will. But if I've got a cruiser, I've got a cruise ship with 1,000 people, it's not going to turn. Volkswagen Financial Services, we are, we're part of the bigger group, right? We're part of Volkswagen Group America, and it's huge, right? And we try our best in the U.S. to align with what the group is doing as well. So there's lots of benefit in that as well. We have other countries that we can country leaders that we can reach out to that are testing other systems and other technologies. We can get very rich, data inputs and experiences just from within Volkswagen itself. Uh, when you think about core systems, right? So there are certain core systems that are implemented that we will all follow and we will all adopt, as a conglomerate. Now, then it becomes very difficult. Now, the pace of change for something that could have taken anywhere from 6 to 9 months takes several years.
Mm.
And even with Volkswagen Financial Services, where I work for the U.S., right, it's over 1,000 employees. We service over 1,000 dealers. We've got about 1.6 million active retail contracts, right? 47 markets. So change moves much faster, always with two things. It always goes back to return on investment, and is it predictive? And then two, it's all about the ability to influence that leader, and what are you bringing to the table to influence that leader on why we should And usually it comes down to revenue or cost avoidance, which that's another one I think is shifting, right? There's so many competitors out there, even with technology today. But if you can avoid cost, if you can avoid fines, if you can avoid slaps on the wrist, that I believe is coming to the forefront now. And I think that's why lean practitioners are probably becoming more popular now. Centers of excellence are kind of re-emerging now because we need to be protected with so much technology, with so much cloud. Now you need people who can get under the hood and ensure that you're protected.
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. Going back to when we were talking about change management just a moment ago, here's a question from Kyler on LinkedIn. She had a follow-up to that, which is, should it be that upskilling is a core change management strategy for organizations that want to improve their processes?
Absolutely, without a doubt, that's a strong yes. I wouldn't depend on just going out and purchasing the upskilling or requiring the training, even though that definitely, if you can do it, do it. One of the things that we try to do is things like this, working with you, Eric, and talking to the industry experts who have that rich understanding of multiple companies of what they're doing. Many times, and I don't want to speak for certain companies, but there's a very large company, right, that focuses more on connecting with what other companies are doing and networking with other experts in the industry than they do outside training, and it works. But the upskilling point to the question is absolutely you have to upskill. Just like it's kind of like saying I need a new platform, because people don't want to go into the bank and wait for cash anymore. They want to go to an ATM, right? People thought that would never happen, and people thought we would never buy off the internet. If you date back as old as I am, right, that no one's going to shop on the internet, right, for Christmas and all that. We're just going to keep going in. Well, it's the reverse. It's the same thing with people. Technology is going to continue to move so fast that if your people stay where they are, they're going to be ineffective, or it's going to take you 2 to 3 times longer to get things done than the A customer the A competitor and the B competitor. So upskilling is absolutely critical.
Yeah, makes sense. I agree with you on that. Here's a question from Andrej on YouTube. Andrej says, from my experience, many operations managers want to fix existing processes rather than working on reengineering or other drastic improvements. How much energy do you devote to evangelism? And then it cuts off here and continues with, instead of already working on improvement. So maybe we start with
I would say that one that's a difficult one for me to answer, honestly. It is that question right there. I believe whomever comes up with the magic bullet for that one should go and teach. Because you have that problem, that thorn in the side, whether that is, I am continuously making errors and it's costing me, and I have a monthly cost it's hitting me. Typically, you want to go in and you want to surgically look at specific steps to improve that part of the process. But on the other hand, there's always someone in the room, going back to where that question comes from, that says, why don't we just look at the entire process and just do this differently? Let's fix the whole thing instead of pieces by pieces. And that's the challenge for my team. We're not a very big team, so we're always balancing or having to pick, which doesn't sound good, but we have to pick which one are we going to go after when we know that the process itself needs an overhaul.
Yeah, and you also have to balance, I suppose, the momentum and support for certain types of process improvement. So, in other words, if you can get management buy-in to do some incremental improvements, and maybe you can't get their buy-in or excitement over doing a massive overhaul, you sort of have to not pick your poison, but you sort of have to decide, well, do I fight an uphill battle and work a little bit harder and longer to build momentum or try building momentum for something that's not there? Or do I ride the wave of momentum that already exists with wanting to make more incremental improvements? Do you see that dynamic, or is that a strategy you've had to navigate in your organization?
That's Monday through Friday, man. That's what you just said is Monday through Friday. And I would say the cloud that's over you at the end of the day is what are you delivering on an annual basis, which allows you a little bit of wiggle room, and the redesigns that take longer produce results. It takes longer to see those results. The results may be longer and more sustainable, but it does come back to what are you required to deliver in 2024? And that's what you have to balance it against, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Other question I had for you here. Whoops, I just lost I have a little technical issue here. Bear with me. When you look at technologies that can help automate or not automate, but help enable business process optimization. So when you look at technologies like RPA or business process mining, et cetera, what are there certain types of technologies, and you've alluded to a couple as well throughout this conversation, but what sort of process optimization or process improvement sorts of technologies are you most excited about right now?
There's one big one, and I think everybody's excited about it, and it's AI. Why AI? For me, we've done so much of RPA that it's almost to the point where we're trying not to say RPA anymore. Right. RPA is something that thank goodness for my team. They're a team that works tirelessly. A lot of times they're on alert because we have robotic employees that don't take days off. So sometimes we need them to do things on Saturdays and Sundays. So you do need that kind of team to continuously keep pressing forward. But what AI will do for me, what AI will do for VWFS is you've taken a lot of those tasks that are highly repetitive, highly standard. We call them robotic tasks. So now people don't want to do them because it doesn't sound cool anymore. But AI gives you the ability to say, okay, now that I have mapped all of my processes to a certain level, where I have clear visibility of all of my value add and my critical process steps. So we have two categories that we map to. And what you have left after RPA are gateways, or many people will see them as diamonds or flow or decision boxes, as they will call them. Well, there's so many decisions that are being made in the background that are not transactional, but they're being made by people. AI gives us an ability to footprint. That's where we're going. For now, we're going to say, okay, we've digitally footprinted everything that we can see that's RPA eligible. What we want to look at now is what is AI eligible. And then once you add up all of that from all the process that you can visibly see in whatever tool that you're using, and you understand the cost and the time for those particular steps in your overall operations, I'm betting that the return on investment could far succeed what RPA is doing today. So AI, for my leader, my current president, my current EVP, who I report to, that is the charge for me and my organization, is to start looking at now, what does that next journey look like? And I think even then, for me, AI will then start to replace where we have RPA at, because then the bots, to me, and to our organization, are temporary fixes for the most part.
Yeah, makes total sense. When organizations are, actually, before I ask you that question, let me go back. I wanted to ask a question that came here from LinkedIn. This is from Kyler on LinkedIn. What advice would you give to an organization that insists on keeping business process management or business process optimization work internal? Often businesses refuse to embrace external ideas and innovation, resulting in the loss of valuable insights. So what are your thoughts on that?
Let me think on that one.
And I think it gets back to what you were talking about before about, hiring consultants, experts, people that have that rich experience,
Mhm,
having done this for multiple industries, organizations, et cetera. So
mhm,
how do you balance that outside, external focused mentality and experience with the need to build, like you've done with your 11 team members,
mhm,
um, building that internal competency to drive process improvements and that
mhm.
sort of thing? How do organizations find that right balance?
Yeah. What two things, and what I always like to do is not speak so much in theory, but speak more in what I have done.
Right.
Uh, Number one, uh, if I could give a nugget out here, is that your external consultants or the industry experts, as I will call them, your Eric Kimberlings, your third stage, they're part of your team. So if they're introduced as part of your team, maybe you're not paying them for everything that they're coming to do. Maybe you're not paying them at all, right? But they're part of your team. They're part of your mentorship. They're part of how you came to the decision that has resulted in a win for that department or that organization. Now it changes the tone a little bit. Now they're not external. They're just not within our company, right? They look at it differently. And then number two, uh, I have uh, I have a strong dependency, and I think it's the same for my leader. We have a strong belief and dependency that if we are only making decisions based on what we can see in our four walls, then we can't possibly have best in class approach. We must absolutely understand what the experts are doing outside of our walls, and what is my best competitor doing, right? And
Right.
this is something that I got from Shingo, right? One of our fathers of lean. The cost of not doing it, right? There's a cost to that. There's an absolute cost for not doing. So the more you don't look outside your four walls, you are absolutely losing something. And
Right.
those are the things that we move by. But I think the first one is start introducing those individuals as part of your journey, part of your team.
It's great. That's it's great advice. I mean, both from a internally focused perspective, if you're driving process optimization internally within your own organization and you're trying to find outside help, maybe not treating them as quote unquote outside help is one way to
Right.
start. And then also if you are that outside help, if you are a consultant or whatever that is supporting a project through their change initiatives, just embedding yourself in the team and being part of the internal team, even though technically you're not, you can still act as more of a internal team member instead of the outside guy or gal coming
Absolutely.
in with all the answers and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Do you find that
And keep them
creates
around, right?
more?
And keep them around.
Yeah,
It's not always about procuring at that moment. It's also about um, always inviting them into multiple conversations. Opportunities will come, and they don't need to be on every conversation. But the more they are involved in what you're doing when they can, uh, the trust builds from there. And then now others are asking for their names, and I think
yeah,
that's the key. Take that wall down.
yeah. Does that mentality of focus on treating them as an internal team member, do you think that helps build more buy-in and ownership of the process improvements and process changes themselves?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I think it's very key, and I am very open. I'm very forthcoming that I'm not the smartest. I don't I'm not a mathematician. I'm not an engineer by trade, right? I'm a business guy. I've got a master's. I've got multiple certifications, but I am constantly looking to surround myself with people who are better than I am, who know more than I do. So if there's anything I would pat myself on the back about is that I'm I'm okay. I'm pretty good at finding people smarter than me and surrounding myself with them. And then what happens is you become smaller and the external people become bigger and more important than you are. You're the messenger at that
Right.
point. And you gotta be humble a little bit to do that, and be willing to not be the smartest person in the room. But I think at the end of the day, what's your objective? If your objective is to get uh, more external ideas implemented within your organization, then position them as the expert at the table.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Makes a ton of sense. Um, Going through some of these other, I'm just kind of scrolling through some of the questions that are coming in here. So we talked about the biggest challenges. We had another question around the most challenging, maybe I'll spin this question a little bit differently than what we covered before, but this is from Mohammed on LinkedIn. He said, what is the most challenging part of digital transformation to automate business processes? Maybe, I know we talked about earlier, what is the most difficult part of business process optimization in general? And you talked about change management and that sort of thing, among other things. In the context of a technology change, though, does that change your perception of how? Is there anything additional you'd add? I guess I'd say in terms of difficulty of process improvement during a technology initiative versus a sort of a more process focused initiative, if that makes sense. Like if in other words, if I'm an organization going through a big technology initiative and I'm trying to figure out, okay, now I'm going to figure out how to do process optimization within this broader technology initiative. Are there different sorts of challenges that happen in those cases versus organizations like yourself that are leading with the process first?
I think with the digital transformation, I still always go back, and I might be one of those few people or only people who think it applies to whether it's digital, whether it's process, right, or whether it's just people. For digital, I truly believe that we have to get off of our static way of documenting. If you go to, I don't care what company you go to, it's typically static. It's a PowerPoint presentation. It's Excel based. It's something that's outdated the moment you walk out the door, like a car you buy and you drive it off the parking lot. It's not worth it anymore. For digital transformation, I think that the biggest challenge is being able to see the process together dynamically. And I don't know where other companies are at, but I do see out there that a lot of companies are requiring the knowledge of being able to map, as I call model, dynamically, meaning that you can apply metadata. Because for me, if I can look at a confirmed process and I can see the systems that are all impacted, if I make this change, my speed to the next step is much faster than someone who's working with static documentation. In addition to that, I know what my capabilities are. So we've worked with Gartner in the past, and don't get me wrong, I've been a customer of Gartner back at Discover. The challenge I had was that it was always handed in a PDF or a PowerPoint. And again, we're at a different day and age now. I need something dynamic, right? So I can change on the fly when there's a new California law that comes in that says I've got to change my process or else, right? And if you're going to do a digital transformation, in order to ensure that you're not violating a Reg Z regulation, right? Reg Z. I'm not calling people too many times, but you want to keep that automated, then you need to be able to pivot quickly. And I think a lot of digital transformations, they take so long simply because we don't have an ability to see our process in a most expedient way and make decisions in a most expedient way to get to the next step. NASA's been doing it forever, right? They're racing other sides of the world to see who can get somewhere faster. They don't have the time to work with static, right? They have to be dynamic. So I think what's happening is we're becoming more technical in our digital transformations, and the insurance and financial services sectors, things like that, that you have to think that way. Process visibility to me is number one. That is the number one sort of underbelly to how fast I can move versus another leader.
Right. Yeah. Now, just to sort of bring this all full circle, then, everything we've talked about so far, if I'm an organization that is going through or about to go through either a technology initiative or just some sort of change initiative, where do I start? When it comes to business process optimization, what are some first steps to help us get started on the journey?
What I would do is always start with assessing your process maturity. And depending on what company you go to, they may or may not understand or have methodology around being able to assess their current process maturity. So I would say that's the first step. And then your process maturity level helps you to understand where you need to go next. And we have a measurable way in regards to what we're trying to get to process level 3, trying to get all operations to a level 3 by the end of this year. And it's a bear. It's not easy. And the second thing you want to be able to do is establish a model around being able to score and rank your opportunities. Many times we're going after something and we're chasing something and we can't get the sign off and we can't get agreement simply because we're not coming to the table with ROI that shakes out, right? It doesn't meet the sniff test. So if you have good process visibility, which goes back to the PML model, because I was challenged on that, is like, how do we make that measurable? How do you know when you're at level 1, level 2, level 3? And why not 5, 4, or 5, right? We have all those answers.
Right.
And just to share, just to make sure I'm clear, the reason why we don't look at 4 or 5, well, we can get to 4, but the reason why we don't look at 4 or 5 is because when we look at 4 or 5, for us, it's reputational damage, it's financial damage, it's things like that. But for an airline or for healthcare, they need to be at a 4 or 5 because there's loss of life, right? You can't be far off there. So your processes need to be very sound. And when you have that model in place, you can not only look at what cost you're avoiding, but you can look at how much time you're saving and put a dollar amount to it. So that's why I say start with that model. Start with a method and a model and work with your finance team and get the buy-in. And then the next thing that you want to do is make sure that everything you look at from the standpoint of improvement has some sort of a scoring and ranking system that fits with it.
Yeah, that's solid advice. I mean, that's a good way to start. I mean, it gives you a framework to sort of assess the current situation and also prioritize. One thing I want to clarify, though, when you talk about maturity, that's different, though, as far as a first step to assess your current maturity of your processes. Maturity does not equal optimized processes, right? Is that, or how would you, maybe you could just help us unpack that a little bit, if you don't mind. Just what's the difference between process maturity and process optimization?
Sure. So for us, and let me be clear, I didn't make up process maturity, or I'd probably have been on your podcast a long time ago.
Millions of books sold, all that stuff.
we look at it, we put it in a standard operating procedure of what we call automation readiness. But when you think about process maturity, you're thinking about the whole of it all. You're not necessarily looking at one process. You're looking at where am I at holistically in a department or an organization. But you start first with one process at a time. And process maturity level is kind of simple on the surface. Number one, are my processes centralized? Am I going in multiple different places because my stuff is scattered all over the room, for lack of better words? That is equates to COPD, cost of poor documentation. There's calculators you can actually Google out there. It's a real thing now. I think actually that's the new 8th waste, to my understanding, by the Lean Institute, is not having your processes digitized. Because it ties back to how much time are you spending looking for information on what your job is or what you need to do next or how you're going to change the process. But process maturity level at its most simple way of thinking is you're at level 1 if your processes are all centralized. You're at level 2 if your processes are all digitally mapped. And you have they're centralized in one place where you can get to all the links, where it links out to your, where your sources of truth are, where your other SOPs are at. You can go to one place if you're looking at it from a digital standpoint. And then process maturity level 3 is where you are not only centralized, they're all digitally mapped, but 3 means that I also have links to my risk and controls. Because then now you're making your auditors happy. So we're not just trying to get to a certain PML level for the sake of process improvement. We're trying to get to a certain PML level so that we can stop depending on documentation, so that we can stop doing the dog and pony show to get ready for an audit. We don't have to get ready anymore. We're always dressed because it's in a dynamic place. It's always centralized. And then when it changes, then I can see something that changed in Eric's process and my process, and I get alerts. So all of that extra effort in a static environment goes away. And that's what we're trying to do to get to PML, what we call PML level 3. And that for us means that if you are not there in a particular process, meaning that that process is not digitally mapped and doesn't have systems and controls in there, and it doesn't link to the dependencies, then you are not ready to automate.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think that process maturity categorization or approach is something that's really important to understand, because it is different than optimization, and it's sort of more of not an assessment of how optimized your processes are, but how mature they are. I think those are two different, two different dimensions that are worth unpacking or just differentiating between, for sure. Well, good. Well, I really appreciate your time here, Tavis. Time flies. We could spend hours on this topic, of course, but in the interest of time and the fact that you and I both have our day jobs to get back to, we won't. But I really appreciate you being here today. This was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you to the audience for the great questions too. You guys had some really good topics to help us hone in on this important topic a bit more. As I mentioned before, this live discussion will be available on demand on YouTube, LinkedIn, or wherever you're watching. So you can go back and watch. You can share the recording with colleagues. It'll also become edited, polished up. We'll add some more content to it to make it part of our official Transformation Ground Control podcast episode that gets released a week from tomorrow. So every Wednesday, there's new episodes of that podcast. If you don't subscribe or watch already, you can do so by going to the website, transformationgroundcontrol.com. So really appreciate the following there as well. So thank you everyone for joining here today. Look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week for our weekly live podcast interview. In the meantime, I hope you have a great week, and we will see you all soon.